The ILA and Women in Leadership member community is pleased to welcome ILA President and CEO, Cynthia Cherry.
Well, let me welcome everybody to the ILA Women in Leadership Conference with this theme of leading differently, where we indeed are all leading differently by conferencing differently. And this conference represents so many hours of work on behalf of so many people, the conference planning team who you're seeing here, the College of St. Rose, our sponsors, our staff, and the executive leadership team of the ILA member community, the Women in Leadership member community. But this conference is possible only because of so many who have worked before us and with us presently. All those who have created the first Women in Leadership conferences and who present it, like many of you are. Those who are pioneers in the study of women's leadership, who wrote chapters for many of the book series. And those who had the vision to create the ILA, including our founding mothers, Georgia Sorensen, Lorraine Matuzak. We are all here because of someone else. We are all here because of those who came before us and those who are working really hard on our behalf. One of those pioneers who has worked on the study of women's leadership is Nancy Adler, who has studied women's leadership in a global society. She was also a pioneer in being the first woman appointed to the management school at McGill University. She's also an artist. And when Nancy was informed that she was selected to receive the ILA Distinguished Leadership Award, she went to work and created a beautiful piece of art, which you are seeing here in front of you. The beauty of this piece of art that she presented to the ILA at the Global Conference was also included some beautiful words that she had written and that she shared. And you have one of the sentences that she said, but she also wrote, and I quote, "ILA is not one color. ILA is a community of color. ILA courageously creates beauty by daring to paint in contrast." These words continue to speak to me about the work we do and aspire to do. Since its inception, the ILA has painted and embraced contrast. The full and colorful spectrum of contrasting views and beliefs and perspectives. We courageously hold the space for those to share ideas, to explore, to challenge, and to change. At the ILA, we realize the importance of connecting with those who are like us and those who are different from us. And today we see this even more with everything that's going on in the world. The global pandemic has amplified the strengths and the weaknesses of our positional leaders, all of our systems, and how we are globally interdependent. The killing of George Floyd and the many others before him amplifies the institutional racism that permeates our societies. And women during this pandemic are seeing and are serving and leading from the front line. Women do this work in spite of obstacles and inequalities. And maybe, just maybe, if we take the time to understand each other, we can tear down the walls of this fractured society. Because it's important in this world that is both precious and precarious that we continue to do the hard leadership work. We must compassionately challenge each other to create change by listening to each other and to the ideas that are different than our own. We all have biases, and we all gravitate toward the beliefs that reinforce our own beliefs. But all the more reason to listen, to truly, genuinely listen to each other, and to ask thoughtful questions, and to challenge ideas with the intellectual curiosity and respect. The respect for the dignity of every person. So there's no time like the present. Time does not pause. Only now we have the time, yes, the time, to really notice what flourishes around us. There's a poem I love by David White, and it's The Heart Aroused. And in that poem, he tells us to make the time. And there are a few lines that I just want to share with you. The journey begins right here, in the middle of the road, right beneath your feet. This is the place. There is no other place. There is no other time. So I want all of us to take the time to practice leading differently, to courageously hold the space, to paint in contrast, to embrace diversity and inclusivity. And I want to thank you for being here, for taking the time to listen and learn for and from each other. And this conference, it is worthy of your time. Thank you.
Please join me in welcoming our conference host and a conference sponsor, the president of the College of St. Rose at Albany, New York, Carolyn Stefanko.
I want to express my gratitude to the ILA staff as well, to the great women who make up the women and leadership community, to those who planned the conference and the program, and especially to my colleagues at the College of St. Rose, Lisa Haley Thompson and Yolanda Caldwell. They believed in my vision for St. Rose to serve as the site for the 5th Women in Leadership Conference. We wanted to celebrate the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage in the US by bringing the conference to New York, where the women's rights movement started, and to mark the centennial of the College of St. Rose, which was a women's college for most of its history. Now, the pandemic accelerated the movement towards virtual communication and conferences, and while we remain a sponsor and a host of the conference, we are able to welcome you to our people, but not to our physical campus in New York. Of course, it is our people, starting with our founders in 1920, who provided access to higher education, initially for young Catholic working class women, and increasingly over time for other marginalized populations, and who rallied behind the idea more recently of creating opportunities for women to develop as leaders through the Bold Women's Leadership Network Scholars Program, which is funded by the Pussycat Foundation with grants of over $2 million over the past 2 years. And I'm very pleased to see that 2 of our scholars are with us this morning. And also through the launch of a Women's Leadership Institute, which supports the advancement of women through education, advocacy, and collaboration. Women's leadership is my passion. And as I complete my tenure as the president of the College of St. Rose, the implementation of these initiatives fills me with pride. Hosting this conference was also a part of my dream for St. Rose, and I hope that everyone has a great experience over the next several days as we continue our journey, learning to lead differently.
And now a few words from this year's conference co-chairs, Joanne Barnes, Dean of the Graduate School, Indiana Wesleyan University, and Lisa Thompson, Chief of Staff, the College of St. Rose.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to welcome you virtually to our campus here in Albany at the College of St. Rose. And I want to most of all acknowledge my president, my mentor, my guide, my leader, Carolyn Stefanko. It was truly her vision that said, when she came back from the ILA conference to say, shouldn't we do this? Let's do this. And I said, okay, let's do this. And we did. And it's been an amazing journey with the International Leadership Association, the Women's Leadership Group, the executive leadership team, and I am just so honored to be part of it. And when my duties were deployed as chair of the college's emergency management team to take over planning for COVID in fall 2020, incredible, incredible colleagues and leaders helped to step up and really, really lead and work. And I cannot thank Yolanda Caldwell enough for her work, and Dr. Joanne Barnes, who I am honored to stand beside. We truly stand on the leaders of visionaries from upstate New York that we talked about yesterday, Lucretia Mott, Susan B. Anthony, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet, who had the vision to start a women's college right here in the state capital. And today, we still have so much work to do for people of color, for women, for the marginalized, for those that do not have the opportunity that we do today. And I am so impassioned to continue Carolyn's vision right here through our Women's Leadership Institute. I pledge to you, Carolyn, looking at you through the screen, that I will make sure that your vision and your passion remains and continues here through the beautiful house that Michelle Barizanok helped us build. Before I leave, I just would like to say a few words from one of my favorite writers and one of the great American women writers of our century, and that is Clarissa Pignola Estes. And it is a piece of work that we are all quite familiar with in some ways, but it is one that I think we can all relate to. And that is that she urges us to, and I will read it, "Yet I urge you, I ask you to please not spend your spirit dry by bewailing these difficult times. Do not lose hope, most particularly because the fact is we were made for these times. For years, we have been learning, practicing, been in training, and just waiting to meet on this exact plane of engagement. And yesterday, after spending time with so many of you, I truly believe that this group of women is made for meeting on this plane of engagement. Thank you for being here virtually at the College of St. Rose. We are so proud to host this conference. And it is my honor and pleasure to turn it over to a woman who has become another guiding force in my life, Dr. Joanne Barnes.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you to the ILA staff, to the Women in Leadership Executive Leadership Team, and to the College of St. Rose. I am so honored to have served as the co-chair for this year's Women in Leadership Conference. And as we were planning the conference and trying to determine a theme, leading differently kept coming to mind. Little did we know that today we would be asking everyone to stand up and lead differently. We know that we have come a long way, but we also know that we have a long way to go. As we began our session on Friday night, our prequel to the 5th ILA Women in Leadership Conference, we heard great words from Ambassador Sujay, who challenged us to lead differently, to gain knowledge, to inspire young leaders, and to make a difference. We have all been called to make a difference. As we went into our conference on Sunday, you were experiencing Padlet, you were sharing information, you were building community, and you are making a difference. We know that the next 3 days you are going to be inspired by great leaders, by great thought leaders, by great practitioners. You are going to want to reach out and do things differently. You are going to want to reach out to a young leader that's coming up and help them along the way so that they too can do great things. We are so pleased that we have this opportunity virtually to come together. I cannot thank the ILA enough for Cynthia Cherry, for Bridget Chiltham, for Tilly Wisely, Julie Posner, Deborah DeVire, all of those who had the vision to say, we are not canceling this conference. We are just going to do it differently. And in 7 weeks, we went from planning an on-site conference in Albany, New York, a beautiful place, the College of St. Rose, and we have turned it into this wonderful, amazing, virtual, online, live, and we say live because we are connecting in ways that we didn't think we could, conference. As you navigate this live conference, remember our space may not be the same, but our passion for leading differently has brought us together. And one of the quotes that I'd like to share with you is from Anne Frank. Anne Frank once said, "How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. I ask you now, let that moment begin right now." Thank you so much for being a part of our conference.
And now Candace Mcinnis, Associate Director of Marketing and Sales at Ivy Publishing, will say a few words about Ivy and their sponsorship of this year's Case Award competition.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you virtually. And on behalf of Ivy Publishing, I want to welcome everyone to the conference. This year, we were very happy to partner with the ILA on a case competition, and we've received some really excellent submissions. And I want to thank everyone who submitted this year. Congratulations to the winner of our case competition, Carolyn Drakely, and her case, Growing Leaders in Silicon Valley, an Emerging Leaders' Quest for Work-Life Purpose, Authentic Leadership, and Gender Equality. We're very thrilled with Carolyn's case, and we're looking forward to discussing it with her more thoroughly this afternoon. Cases can really make a difference in leadership education, and we at Ivy Publishing are trying to continue to build a collection which reflects diverse experiences and perspectives so we can truly learn to lead differently. If you're interested in learning more about case writing, I hope you can join us, myself and Dr. Allison Conrad of Ivy Business School this afternoon to learn a little bit more about case writing and have some discussions around women in leadership. Once again, Carolyn, congratulations on your case, and I hope you enjoy the conference. I'm looking forward to the next few days and learning more with all of you. Thanks again.
Please welcome your moderator for this morning panel on Places, Spaces, and Challenges Across Generations, Bridging Solutions, Lisa DeFrank-Cole. Lisa is the director of West Virginia University's Leadership Studies program. She is also the Harriet E. Lyon Professor of Women's and Gender Studies at West Virginia University.
Good morning, and let me add my welcome to you to our inaugural online women's conference. You are in for a very meaningful intergenerational discussion in this panel this morning. From the Atlantic to the Pacific, our panelists are speaking from Toronto, Canada, Clinton Corners, New York, and Orange County, California. As your moderator, I'm located in Morgantown, West Virginia, and we appreciate your being with us, no matter where you are in the world. The flow of this plenary session will first include introductions by each of our panelists, followed by a discussion inspired by questions from me, and then it will conclude by our taking questions from the audience through the chat feature in Zoom. Without further ado, let's begin by having our first panelist introduce herself. Kehkashan will lead off.
Thank you so much. I am so honored and excited to be here today. My name is Kehkashan Basu. I am the founder and president of award-winning social innovation enterprise Green Hope Foundation. I am a gender crusader, a speaker, author, and musician, a United Nations Human Rights Champion, and the winner of the 2016 International Children's Peace Prize. And I've been recently chosen as the youngest recipient of the 2020 L'Oréal Paris Canada's Women of Worth honoree. So I was also the youngest ever global coordinator for the United Nations Environment Program, Children and Youth, and the youngest recipient of Canada's Top 25 Women of Influence. And currently I am a National Geographic Young Explorer and the current youth lead of the Toronto St. Paul's Constituency Youth Council. So 8 years ago, I was one of the youngest delegates at the Rio +20 Earth Summit in Brazil. And I realized that out of 50,000 delegates there was a severe lack of inclusivity of not just young people, but children in the sustainable development process. And in order to address this lack of inclusivity, on my return home, I started and founded my own organization, Green Hope Foundation, to provide children with the platform to learn about sustainability challenges and then take actions to mitigate the problems. And we work with children and youth all across the world, especially girls in marginalized communities, using education for sustainable development as a transformative tool, as well as creative modes of communication like music, art, dance, drama, sport, and fashion to spread awareness, especially since most of the children and girls whom we work with have never had access to formal education. So Green Hope seeks to be the platform to bridge this inequality gap by empowering the young, the vulnerable, and those who are marginalized, especially the girls who have faced the additional gender bias, by building a grassroots movement, a bottom-up approach where no one is left behind, and where the implementation of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals happens at all levels, especially at the grassroots level. So what began as a 12-year-old's dream is now a global change-making platform in 16 countries as of date. So that is me.
Thank you, Kehkashan. And next we'll have Hadeel.
Hello, everybody. I'm really happy to be part of this inspiring group. My name is Hadil Anaptawi. I'm the founder and CEO of the Alchemist Lab. I'm an engineer by profession, a professional certified life coach. And I received We Empower Award for advancing UN SDGs in good education and the DVF Award. I also serve as a board member in Business and Professional Women Association in Jordan. I was raised in Jordan in the Middle East, one of 4 daughters with no brothers. I was blessed to have a supportive family and good schooling. However, when I graduated, I realized that our schools are information-based and not skills-based. In 2012, this inspired me to establish the Alchemist Lab because I believe that good education is not about memorizing facts. It's about training the mind to think. Through hands-on STEM experiences, science, technology, engineering, and math, and clubs, school discovery trips, we build children's and youth's capacity. And not only children and youth, we also train teachers. Our challenge is that our school system lacks the activities of creative and critical thinking. But our challenge has another level in Jordan and the Middle East, which is that young girls at the age of 15, they outscore boys in STEM studies. However, their participation in STEM careers is less than 30%. So in 2015, we launched Go Girls, a program that is specifically for girls in less fortunate areas and refugee camps. We build girls' capacity in STEM, and we train them on different life skills. And also we bring them women in STEM role models to inspire them. We believe that STEM is the future. We believe that the more we build the capacity of young girls in STEM, we will have more working women in the future, and we will have more women working from their homes and their villages by being entrepreneurs in ideas that adopt STEM. And also we will have more women leaders. We also in Jordan, we are 10 million in population, 2 of which are refugees. So our focus is also the refugees in order to provide fair and good education and equal education opportunities to all kids in Jordan. So in 2019, we launched the activities of the Alchemist Lab in the biggest Syrian refugee camp in Jordan, Az-Za'atari camp. To date, we reached more than 34,000 Jordanian girls and boys with ambitions and plans to reach more than 1 million in Jordan and the Middle East. In Jordan, people dream of a future that have fewer challenges, but in reality, economic, social, and political problems are increasing. I believe that the solution is a generation of children with the resilience to manage a challenging future. A young generation who leaves school ready to solve whatever problem they have, personal problems, community problems, regional problems, and even global problems. We do envision a future like that at the Alchemist Lab. We believe in a future like that, and we work hard to create a future like that. This is me in a nutshell. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hadil. Last, but certainly not least, we have Phyllis. Phyllis, can you hear us? Phyllis, I think your microphone is on mute.
How about now?
Perfect.
All right. Well, once again, hello, everyone. I'm Phyllis Vader. I'm speaking to you from Clinton Vineyards in the Hudson Valley in New York. And I am absolutely honored and delighted to be part of this conference and tremendously impressed by the women who are on this panel with me. And thinking about women in leadership, these last weeks, especially last days, have indicated just how powerful women locally here in especially DC have been. And so I want to say a particular word of thanks to the Episcopal Bishop of Washington, Reverend Buddy, and the Mayor of DC, Marion Bowser. These women have stepped forward at a time and have shown really their true grit and inspiration. So I thank you. My world is that presently of providing pleasure, providing joy in growing grapes, making wine, and helping direct the New York State wine world. I was the first female to be president of the New York Wine and Grape Foundation board. And it was a great privilege, and one that came rather surprisingly because I represented the smallest area of the state in terms of wine growing, and also one of the smallest vineyards in the state. So it was terrific that a group of men decided to give me this honor. And I'm happy to continue not as president of the Wine Foundation board, but as an advisor and also a big supporter. But my career started actually in the nonprofit world. And because of the role that I had in health and welfare world in New York City, I came to know a man by the name of Milton Glaser, a very famous graphic designer. You will know him because he designed the I love symbol that is worldwide. And Milton hired me to work at his studio, which was Pushkin Studios, regarded as one of the great worldwide studios in terms of graphic design. And we had the distinction of being the first American graphic design studio to be invited to exhibit at the Louvre. That was my first assignment, given to me with great nervousness on my part, but with excitement. And we had a 2-month retrospective at the Louvre. The show then traveled all around the world, which I was in charge of in terms of, in fact, bringing people from the United States to join us. From New York, 100 people came to Paris for the opening of our show. And that turned out to be a marvelous ambassadorship for me to bring graphic design to other places in the world. Following that, after a number of years, I had the great pleasure of joining through marriage and becoming involved with graphic design. I'd like to say now that I am of the generation where, while there were women who were supportive of one another, the scene was not anywhere near the way it is today. I'm speaking now as a woman who's an octogenarian, sort of surprising to me as a matter of fact, but it was a totally different world. While my friends were happy for what I was doing, I had diverted totally from what my family and background would have expected me to do. And so I really have to say that men were instrumental in giving me the opportunity to do the things I came to do in my career. And so as I approached my 50th birthday, I met the gentleman who was a pioneer in the Hudson Valley and in New York wine growing. And that gentleman, Ben Vader, became my husband. He was excited that I was interested in what he was doing. And I was able to have a multi-career of graphic design, being a partner of Pushman Studios, and coming up here to the Hudson Valley and getting involved with agriculture and winemaking and all of that. And so for me, today, I am once again starting a new chapter in terms of Clinton Vineyards. I am happy to tell all of you that this year my vintage will be called Tribute in honor of the heroes of the COVID pandemic. And so there's a lot more for me to do. I am happy to say that it's exciting for me to hear about what my fellow panelists have been doing. I really wish I would have the time, and maybe I will, to get involved more on a global scene. What I'm doing right now, though, is helping locally to support the Hudson Valley Food Bank, because it is astounding to me that we are dealing so much with hunger in this marvelous America. So I thank you all. I invite you all, now that we're virtual friends, I would be delighted to have you come and visit me here at Clinton Vineyards. And I raise a glass, although symbolically not filled at this moment in the morning, to all of the women who are participating. And I give you my heartfelt thanks for all that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. With an intergenerational panel, many of us are interested in knowing how one's thinking changes about leadership at different ages or stages in life. So that's our first question. Whoever on the panel would like to take it, please go ahead.
I would like to start actually to say that I think it's like a personal journey of growth and personal growth, and basically we can see ourselves where we start like developing our leadership from being a manager to a leader, leading our teams in order to serve a certain objective of the company. However, with time, the more we are self-aware about our strengths and our potential, our values, and mainly what's more important is what's our life purpose and mission. Because when we start to realize that, I felt that there was like a big jump in the way I'm leading my company and I'm leading the impact in my community, because it turned from leading just the company to reach its goals and objectives to leading an impact and change in the community. And so basically from experience and exposure, and also knowing more about ourselves, we turn to become like better leaders who are creating young leaders, supporting young leaders, and creating an impact in our community. So this is what happened to me. Yeah.
My journey began when about 12 years ago, when I was 8 years old, and every step I took back then was met with adult cynicism and quite often ridicule. And at that age, I didn't really know how to handle it, and it was the support of my parents that gave me the strength. And it was a growing process for me as well. As it broadened my view, it toughened me to resistance, and it strengthened my resolve to persevere. And cyberbullying was also a very real threat that I had to endure for several years. And it was scary. But again, it was my support system that taught me to confront the bullies and stand up for what is right and act as a role model for other children and girls who faced similar problems to me, or even worse problems as compared to me. And instead of being cowed, I took that as a challenge and moved forward. And one thing I realized very early on is that leadership can be a very lonely journey, but at the same time, it's very fulfilling. And it really takes you to the people who are actually passionate and who are actually supportive of the work that you do. And I'm really glad that I chose to be in front instead of being cowed by the problems that I endured at such a young age. I'm really glad that I was able to be in front and be a role model for other people my age. It made me a stronger and more passionate and more positive person. And that is what enabled me to reach out to the marginalized communities that we work in currently, whether it's in the Rohingya refugee camps on the Bangladesh-Myanmar border, or on the Lebanon-Syria border at the Syrian refugee camps, or homes for children of prisoners in Kenya and Nepal, orphanages in Nepal, Suriname, Kenya, and even homes for HIV positive children in Nepal. So making sure that no one is left behind, and really being that role model just through my lived experiences.
Phyllis? I think you're still on mute, Phyllis.
I unmute. I don't know why. For some strange reason, it keeps going to mute. Well, I am, to repeat my absolute admiration for the women who are serving on this panel with me. My quest was really one that was totally directed by the fact that I am a first-generation American. And in my family, the idea of me being educated, of course, was primary to the family. But at a certain point, the expectation was that I would follow a more traditional route. However, what guided me was, luckily, that I did a lot of reading, and there were people in the world whom I admired, and I had an incredible fantasy life that enabled me to dream and to think about things that were far beyond what my immediate family were doing. And happily, they, because of their love for me, were helping me up to a point. And then I sort of had to persevere rather, and say, well, this is what I really want to do, and how about it? And luckily and happily, they were behind me. So when I decided that I was going to go to grad school and thought for a while about becoming a doctor, that did not exactly fit what my father certainly wanted for me. But he and I came to understand that it would not be advisable for me to go back to undergrad, get the courses I was required to go to med school. And so I simply went on and got a master's, got involved with social work and so on. And then my whole life has always been, on one level or another, activist or as a participant in the background of supporting causes that are supportive of liberal democracy. And these days, we know that we have to speak louder, we have to hold our heads higher, we have to donate our energies in many ways, including financial support, which I help to raise money for causes, and I will continue to do that. I think right now, I would love to see more people of certain ages getting really involved under the main tent, in the main arena.
You know, Phyllis, that's a good segue to our next question, which is, why do you think connecting intergenerationally is important for women in leadership?
Well, I mean, on a very elementary level, we learn a lot, hopefully, from people who've been down the road and have picked up skills, insights, and so on. So I've always been attracted to people of generations beyond me, and very excited about those who are younger, because that's where a lot of the energy that has not been filtered comes from. And that always inspires me. That the rules, a lot of the rules have changed, clearly. I mean, look at the opportunities that my fellow panelists have described that have been available to them. It's astounding that an 8-year-old would be thinking about the world. My dear, I hand you my love and hugs and kisses and admiration for doing what you started at such an early age to do. But I don't think that we should be handicapped by where we are in terms of age. But the other part of me has always been ignited by people who are different. I'm not interested in cookie cutter anything. And so being encouraged, but also to be able to feel comfortable in following in various footsteps, whether they be of those younger, older, in your own age group, that should not be the barrier. The idea of people who have something to offer. And there are a lot of people, if you scratch superficial surfaces, you can come to understand what it is. And these days, there is a great deal of intergenerational activity, I think more than ever. And I think a lot of young people have made it possible for those of us, older folk, to really be turned on to what's going on. And so the horizons have broadened. And that to me is very, very exciting. Thank you.
I completely agree. And I think it's really important that in all aspects of work, intergenerational solidarity is promoted, because you're never too old or too young to learn. And we need the wisdom and uninhibitedness from both sides of the spectrum to actually come together and create this better world that we are all moving towards. So yes, I think intergenerational solidarity is absolutely critical to women and leadership, just to learn from each other, to share best practices, and just work together.
Yeah, I agree actually. And one thing that people always ask me, why are you focused and your passion is with the young generation? And I always say that at the age of 50, I realized that if I've given these kids the experience that I have now, what I know about myself, the way I've developed my character, my leadership, my skills, if I was given actually everything that I know now at young age, and I've given this to everybody else, probably we would change the world. So I think really the communication between generations, having mentors, is really important for at different ages and at different development ages of career and of personal growth also.
Yeah, and I think just like to add that I've seen it in my journey of growth and leadership as well, that I started at a really young age, but I was influenced by the leadership that I saw my mom undertake. And I think that was so inspirational, and not just my mother, but my grandmothers as well. So, and now I pass that on to the next generation. So yes, intergenerational solidarity is so, so important, especially in these current times.
Thank you. Before we move on to our next question, I want to remind our participants in the audience that they're welcome to send in via chat to Joanne Barnes a question if you'd like to ask to the panel. So once we're finished with some of the preliminary questions, we can move on to audience questions as well. To the panel, what are 2 to 3 of the most important ways that women can help other women succeed, and especially women and girls from marginalized communities? How can we empower them, or how can we help them empower themselves by leading differently?
So in my work, I have always seen that education is literally the key to our empowerment, and we must create and facilitate ease of access to education, especially skills-based, focusing on where the gaps exist in rural societies, in marginalized communities, amongst migrants and refugees and regions of strife and disaster. And honestly, in many parts of the world, we continue to be at the bottom of the economic and social ladder. And in these environments, it's really important to focus that education here. And I also think it's really important to change social perceptions that requires the engagement of men and boys and of local policymakers, of village elders, who in many cases have the power to decide life and death. So it requires work at the grassroots level and engaging everyone when we're talking about gender equality, and even based on that, education. And the third thing I'd like to say is that we need to bridge the data gap. There is currently very little data on violence against women and girls. Many nations, a majority actually, do not have laws that mandate gender-based statistics based on violence against women and girls. So you need to be able to have the data and not just have women's issues just like brushed under the rug. You need to have it at the forefront. It needs to be transparent, and that will help the women and girls to actually achieve that self-empowerment that will help them to achieve their dreams and wishes.
Yeah, I would agree actually about really education, because probably that we are really focused on that aspect. So education is the key in these areas. I would also agree on having mentorship and connections to people who coach these young girls. And I want to share a little story actually, that I was like in a training session in one of the villages in Jordan. And while I was talking, a group of young girls were whispering, and then I insisted to know what was the story. And one of them, she said, I was telling the other girls that, look, she's married, she studied engineering, she travels, she's that and she's that and she's that. So I realized back then that young girls in villages, they need to see role models who were able to balance their lives between careers and between being wives and mothers, because in less fortunate areas, usually with the cultural barrier, they're not really exposed that there are other roles for women than being wives and mothers, especially in our region. So basically, I think bringing role models to them of women who have careers, who are successful, who work in different sectors that are dominated by men, and were able to make it, will inspire the young girls in these areas.
Yes, I agree. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I agree totally with what has been said, but I also want to expand on one notion, and that is that education clearly is the key. But I also think that one has to deal with prejudice. One has to deal with those whose minds are so closed to new ideas, so that when we look at other cultures, it isn't an immediate fix that we resonate to it, that we are willing to support it. Because those things that are not familiar to us, require a different mindset for acceptance. And so for me, to be able to look at other cultures, other people and the way they do things, and be willing to accept it really on an emotional level will enable me and others to support that in more ways than just sort of nodding one's head and saying, oh yes, isn't this interesting, or isn't that sad, or isn't it, you know, we really have to be willing to accept the way other people live and have respect for it and have a desire to see that those people in the world have an opportunity and a right to have the things that we here in the Western world, where we are affluent, take for granted. To me, that is an absolute.
Kehkashan, I saw you took your mic off mute. Did you want to add anything to that discussion?
I just wanted to actually say that I had a very similar experience where, which what Hadil was mentioning about, in a village in Bangladesh, where we had gone there and we had heard about the women and the grandmothers actually who had become entrepreneurs. And it was just amazing to see that despite them not having education, their daughters and their granddaughters were educated, and the granddaughter actually spoke to us in fluent English and actually introduced the like everyone and talked about how inspiring it was that because her family and the women in her family were role models for her generation, they were able to actually create this like sustainable economy in their own village. So yes, I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. And it kind of leads into a follow-up question. I mean, we've talked about a little bit about culture. We've talked a little bit about role models. And I guess the next question, if we take it in that vein a little bit more, is if you've ever had a mentor or a sponsor, do you believe they helped you navigate leadership? Basically, who made an impact on you and your leadership?
I'd like to start with that. Acknowledging that I hadn't realized this before, but in fact, Milton Glaser was my sponsor, in the sense of having enough confidence in me to bring me into Pushpin Studios at a time when we had this amazing opportunity of working with the Louvre and international touring of a show, etc. So by all means, I mean, the fact that he took someone who'd come from the nonprofit world into this brand new arena, most definitely he was the man who propelled me into a career in that field. And from there, because I met so many interesting people, that was a launching pad for me to broaden my interest and then to become involved with the wine world here in New York. And there too, sponsorship were men who were in charge, because in those days there was one other woman on the board of directors. So it wasn't an opportunity that women could give to other women, except that we did moving forward. And I'm happy that I was part of that sponsorship for 2 other women.
Yes, I would add also that actually the support for a good leader and a great leader in the future starts at the family. So that's why I do believe that young people, when they are like supported by their own families to lead and to be confident, this is really essential. And at every stage of our lives, we really need a leadership mentor, I would say. And personally, I was really blessed to have women during my life, and men also mentoring me and pushing me over the edge and over the cliff to do and to lead and to start initiatives. And I would really take this opportunity to thank Joanne, actually, because she's been like my leader, Joanne Barnes from ILA. She was like my mentor. my leadership mentor throughout the last 2 years, actually having someone really to share what's going on with us, and to look at things in a different view whenever you feel stuck, you feel everything is unclear what to do, and really supports your personal growth is really amazing. So it's really very important to have people, women, and to have even men in your life to support your leadership journey, and also the family. I would say that they are really helpful in that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And my parents have been and continue to be my greatest support. And I've never had any sponsors. My strength is my grassroots work that really speaks for itself. And what I learned from my parents is that I don't preach anything that I myself have not implemented and practiced. So once people get to know about my work, then I receive their support. And my organization, Green Hope, is now like a family. And most of the core group members are either my age or much, much younger than me. So I think that another very important thing that I learned from my parents as leadership mentors is that age has nothing to do with capability. So whether we are talking to first graders or whether we are talking to someone in the private sector, my parents' leadership actually motivated me to just believe in myself and believe in my expertise, and just practice what I preach and pass on that knowledge to others, no matter who it might be.
I would just like to add one thought to share with you. In these times when so many refugees are on the main page of newspapers and in television and so on and so forth reports, I found myself thinking a great deal about my mother in particular. Both of my parents came to this country, mother from Russia, my father from Austria. And when I think about the bravery of coming to a country where you do not know the language, where you don't have financial backing or resources immediately available to you, I think of their absolute extraordinary courage. And mostly I think about my mother, because she was a woman who unfortunately did not have the benefit of much education, but for her, education was the key. And so she was a leader in our family of always wanting to direct us to those things in life that would enhance us in the way of music, of reading, of wanting to share ideas. And so I was very fortunate, even though she could not do it on her own, she propelled us, my brother and I, to feel that the importance of caring and education was such a major part of her message to us. She was also a good cook, and that helped bring us all together in ways that were nourishing on all the levels.
I really have enjoyed all of the examples that each of our panelists have brought up in terms of different countries, whether it's Bangladeshi children or Syrian refugees in Jordan, or immigrant ancestors from Austria or Russia. I'm curious how cultural norms have impacted your decisions and your leadership.
My upbringing has definitely played a huge role in my decisions and leadership. I was brought up in an environment where women are embodiments of Shakti or power, and I was always encouraged to follow my passion, and my parents were always there for me. And I was basically raised as a global citizen, where my religion was always humanity first. So my parents took me to churches, temples, mosques, and really taught me that the universality of all of humankind and tolerance for all religions, spiritual beliefs, and just them thinking about the community and the environment not as an afterthought, but something that is just part of our daily lives. So really my upbringing just has shaped who I am and how I lead within my organization and how I impart the knowledge that I gain to the other people who are involved in the work that I do.
Yeah. Yeah, I would really also add something that I've like mentioned in my introduction, that I'm one of 4 daughters with no brothers, and people who know the Middle East usual men there, they like to have like a son. And we were like 4 daughters. Of course, my father used to say, no, I don't really care. But deep inside, I could feel that he wanted to empower these girls to be really confident and to be able to lead their own lives. And that was to my advantage and to my sister's advantage. I would say that this affected us really to be ourselves, to be confident, and not to look to a guy in our like life to be dependent on. So we grew up to be really independent, and actually sometimes he pushed us maybe even further that than we should really, but that was really good. But and this affected me actually from early age, because I started to say, okay, I should be the independent person. I should study. Education was the key. Our selections in life basically were affected by this upbringing of my father. But of course, there are many challenges in the Middle East, because there are many places that are conservative. I can see that many families, the way they raise their daughters, it affects really their selection in life. And this is one of the things that we'd like to really change, and to break these cultural barriers for many young girls who want to lead in their own communities.
I would say that my family situation definitely had an impact in terms of the type of community that I aspired to live in. I always saw myself as being an independent woman. My father would have liked otherwise, for me to think of growing up and having a man take care of his little girl, except that his little girl was almost 6 feet tall and not exactly looking like somebody that needed to be taken care of. So I, from an early age, wanted to be in the bigger arena, most definitely. And my family did not object to that, in fact. They supported it because it was possible for us all then to have a broader experience, which really nurtured us all. And so for me, although I diverged from the traditional Jewish family in terms of expectation of having a family of my own, which I never did have children, I really feel that at the end of the day, what I was able to do for myself in terms of going into a bigger, broader, very multicultural world really helped bring it back into the family circle. And so there was a nurturing almost from me back to my family based on the things that I was very interested in doing.
So I'm interested in talking about clothes for a moment. You may not see the direct link between clothes and gender equity, but I am curious in knowing how perhaps traditional clothes or professional attire has changed over time, for better or for worse. And has it impacted gender equity for women and or men?
Yeah, I would actually to start to talk about this, because I had like an experience when I started my work in an industrial sector dominated by men, and I was like working hard to reach higher positions in that company. And I remember that my perception about things at the beginning, that was okay, coming into the room with a suit where I really, with a black suit or a navy blue suit, that would really make me look similar to people in the room, and this will help me really reach senior positions. And that was as early ages of my career. And I can see back then that many women, they were challenged by this. They want to fit in, so even clothes was a challenge for them, that we need to fit in. Now, of course, now everything has changed, and as we were discussing that even in certain sectors, the way we're more comfortable, women and men, with the way we dress. So now it's evolving a new era of, you see, maybe with the entrepreneurs and the tech entrepreneurs, it's becoming that you can enter a room and see people with no suits at all. So that's good. That's good, because I think that when you limit yourself, even when you try to dress to impress people, this really, in a certain way, becomes a barrier of the way you express yourself, because you're trying to be a different person, that you're not that person. When you're more comfortable with the way you dress and you're confident about how you look, I think this will help you to really excel, be the person you are, and to open your arms to life and to everything around you. I would say this is my personal experience. I'm not sure about the other on the panel, if you had similar challenges during your lives. Yeah.
Well, seeing as how I represent the broadest age group here, I can recall going to work wearing high heels, well, not so high, but pantyhose, a dress, this traditional pearl necklace, etc. And that was the uniform. And that kind of guided everybody, I think. A lot of women were doing that. Then we were into the phase of wanting to wear the suit. And then the pantsuit came along, and so on and so forth. But for me, the real opening for more unconventional, more, shall we say, combination of glamour and design and style really came when I got involved in the graphic design world, because there were no dress codes, and none of the men in the studio ever wore suits. And so it was a whole other kind of thing. But I found it interesting, too, that there was a point at which a lot of designers were trying to make women look more like men, or to cross over into non-sexually identified clothing styles, which I found very comfortable and terrific. So these days, and of course with people working at home and doing things with remote technology, the joke was, who's wearing pants sitting at the desk in the first place at all these days? So everything is more relaxed anyway. When we get back to the normal world, we won't be concerned about whether we're wearing sweatpants or whether we're wearing no pants or whether we're wearing a dress, or those things have gone by the by.
Yeah, I think societal norms have definitely evolved. When I started going into the international arena, and I was like, hey, my attire, including my formal wear, has always been extremely colorful, as you can see in my wearing my blazer. But I used to be the only person at these United Nations conferences where I was speaking, and the rest of the speakers and the delegates were all wearing black or blue suits, and there was me wearing this bright pink or neon green. And I always saw my parents wear what they felt reflected their personalities, and I continue to do that. But just a few months ago at the latest UN conference, I looked around and I realized that every single person was wearing red, blue, green, all different colors. And I think there was probably one person who was wearing a navy blue suit. So I literally, I didn't even realize that it had changed, but it has changed, that this whole thing about wearing like a power suit or whatever. You make your own clothes, your power suit, and you wear what makes you feel most comfortable and what reflects your personality and what you want to achieve. So yeah, I think it has definitely changed for the better.
That was a fun discussion. I enjoyed seeing the participants post in the chat. That got a lot of feedback from people remembering those power suits and the way it used to be. Well, I have one more question for our panel, and then we're going to go to some audience questions. And this question, I think we have mentioned it in the past, bringing in men. We know that gender equity should not just rest on the shoulders of women. What can we do to bring men more into this discussion? To promote equality and justice.
Yeah, I think first of all, identifying that women's rights and gender equality is not just a women's issue, it's a human rights issue. And you really need to, I think once again, through education, involve men and boys in the gender equality process. And it does start at home because first of all, boys and girls in the same house should not be raised differently. And if a boy does not see his father respecting his mother, he grows up thinking that that is the right way. So that mindset really has to change. So it's really critical that we take these steps. And at Green Hope Foundation, we ensure that we have our men and boys and our male members all a part of our gender equality campaigns and videos and being at the forefront of our campaigns. So when we advocate for gender equality, we have people of all genders being at the forefront and talking about this extremely important human rights issue.
I think also we have to be more understanding of the road that a lot of men have had to travel in terms of accepting women on many levels in work, as leaders and so on. And they almost, they need our help in being brought into this whole conversation and our understanding, because a lot of times men, unfortunately, I see it in men of my generation and earlier, the notion that they have to exhibit a certain type of manliness was so restrictive and so ridiculous as we look at it now. And the notion of their fear, perhaps, of identifying that part of themselves that really has our softness or our willingness to be embracing of different approaches. So I think that we need to help the men in order to bring them into an understanding. And I think that's happened. I think men today are far more willing to have women as colleagues. I mean, I see it everywhere in terms of my own circle and the children of friends of mine who are doing things in a way that clearly is bringing the gender gap closer to being closed. And that to me is very exciting.
Yeah, I agree with actually the others, but I would like really also to add that I think we have to start with the young people again, I would say young boys, and because we notice that at young age, boys, they see girls equally, but with time, especially at the teenage, they start to look, okay, she's a girl, he's a boy, and then they start to be pushed by the cultural norms. What is the role of each person? So I think education can play a good role at schools to really bring boys to the table where the challenges as gender equity is not only a women's issue. So in schools, and having this debate at school is very important, and in universities, of course, this is number one. Number two, maybe we should really start to highlight some topics as not a gender equality thing, meaning that if girls don't have access to STEM, although we really think that this is our mission, but I would rephrase that challenge by saying if girls don't have access to good quality of STEM skills building, this is an education issue. This is an issue of fair and good education that should be led by educational institutes and the Ministry of Education, not led by women organizations and women organizations who are seeking gender equity. So there are many things that we really address, and we're cornered in certain situations that we're turning everything that it's a challenge for women, but we have to shift it to be a challenge for economy, for countries, for building good families, for building the future for the country. So, and another thing also, I think we have, I would say that men, they like to be talking to other men. So the more we bring more men advocates to conferences like this, and we partner with really institutions that have many men who believe in this idea, we might be able to get more men on the table. Because I talk to some friends at this age who are really males, and they like to support the causes, but many of them, they say, okay, we feel that we're not in our place when we come to a place where it's really there are women in the room. Although as women we fight to go in places dominated by men, but in order to encourage more men, I think we have to invite them and to have like advocates who lead organizations for women empowerment. It's not solely only for women to lead these organizations. There should be more men, because men, they will talk to men and they will bring more men, and it will be rolling on.
I just want to break in for one moment. I support what you're saying totally, but one thing that has impressed me in the last few years, the increased number of women who are in the media, whom we see on a daily basis, whereas that used to be the province of men, probably 90% of the time. And that has changed. And it is also so apparent to me now how many younger women are now reporters and who are on television and who are very, very smart, and the men are listening to them very, very clearly. And to me, that's a marvelous new arena for us.
These are fantastic responses. Thank you. And we certainly want to leave time for questions from the audience. So Joanne, shall I turn it over to you for questions?
Actually, I believe Bridget is going to be announcing our speakers for questions. So we're going to turn it back over to Bridget. Bridget, please.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. Our first question is going to come from Pat Clary. Pat, do you want to ask your question?
I would be happy to do that. But first I have to say, if all I took away from ILA was yesterday's interaction with the great conversations and the panelists, and today, I would be a happy woman. This has just been an amazing plenary session. And so thank you so much. Hadil, this is a question for you. I was very impressed with each panelist and really stand in awe of all of you. But my question is this, and forgive my ignorance here, talking about education. What does education look like in a refugee camp? And the second part of the question is, what is your greatest challenge in bringing education to the girls?
Yeah, actually, the education inside the refugee camps in Jordan, it's like the public education. So it's like it reports to the Ministry of Education, and it's exactly like public schools in Jordan. But these public schools, we have questions on the type of education in general, because we do think that most of our schools, they are focused on information rather than skills building. So accordingly, the refugees, they lack skills building in particular, as many kids in other public schools. Of course, there are other challenges at the beginning that they had to do shifts inside the schools to take the high number of refugees that they came inside and came to Jordan. However, now inside the refugees camps, there are schools built there. So the formal education, they are getting it, but the skills building, we have a question mark about it. So, but education is improving in Jordan, and actually even after the pandemic, the government started to realize that partnership with the private sector and focus on the new ways of introducing education to kids is very important. Now for girls, I would say again, it's not that they don't have education at school, but I think for girls in specific, when it comes that they go to public schools, but they have cultural barriers and cultural norms that guide their personal growth. So you might easily find in villages a top student as a girl in a public school at the age of 15 and the number one in the class, who dreams to be a wife. And when you ask her to really, what are you going to do next? She says, okay, maybe I'll have kids. I'm not sure that my family allows me to go outside the village to go to universities. If I go into engineering, I can't leave the village. My family is here. So there are many cultural barriers, and that's why we believe in STEM as a solution, because all over the years, most organizations are focused on empowering the girls and women to become independent and to really be of a certain character and certain, I would say, skill set look as girls. But what I believe in, that we have to go to villages, understand their limitations, and provide solutions so girls, they can become wise mothers and maybe get their learning online in a way. Maybe they become entrepreneurs to develop solutions where they can't risk a lot, because in villages, girls, they marry early. So if you go to start to empower at the age of 22, probably she gave up on education. She has kids. So if you empower her to leave the village, she's paying a lot of it's a high risk for her. This is what I would say. So going early and empowering girls that they have choices, and again, they have choices to be whoever they are, and they can be whoever they are even if they don't get a support of the family around them or the community around there. This is exactly what we aim to do, and we focus on as the right education for these girls. The informal thing that focuses on skills building, being confident to be who they are, regardless of all the barriers that they are facing in their communities.
I'd just like to jump in here as someone who also works with children in refugee camps, both the Syrian refugee camps and Rohingya refugee camps. I would like to agree that localizing the Sustainable Development Goals and localizing the solutions is extremely important, and empowering them not just to go outside and create change, but become agents of change within their own zones of influence and within their communities. And the way we do that with the children and girls is through, as I mentioned before, music, art, dance, drama, and sport. And we've seen that in the refugee camp, that one child actually rapped about their experiences, and the child was 8 years old, when that child hadn't spoken for months before because of the trauma. And that was something that helped them to be self-empowered to express their ideas. And again, through art, in in the Rohingya refugee camp, one child had said that, okay, so after she drew out her picture of an ideal future, she said that for me, it's not, gender equality is about not getting married early. She never said it was not about never getting married. It was just not getting married early. It was doing everything that she wanted and then creating change within her own community. So I think localizing solutions is extremely important.
Yeah, and basically focusing on it's my choice. What I'd like to see that we're empowering young girls that they have choices, and there is power in choices because they are raised to believe that they have only one choice in their villages, and this is really not true.
Yeah.
I hate to think that we're
Excellent.
coming to our almost end of our program here, but I think, do we have time for one more question, Bridget?
Yeah, I think just the one from Dom Zoldi. That's all we're going to have time for. Dom, would you like to ask your question?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, thank you all, amazing women and leaders, very inspirational. And I feel actually my question, when I asked it earlier in the chat, you've almost answered it, but I'm going to ask anyway. So you all were really blessed to have amazing families that supported you. And, you know, I think most of us will agree here that, you know, leadership and character both start at home from day one, right? So the challenge is, as educators, as leaders, how do we address the folks that didn't have those kinds of strong, you know, family positive role models at home? You know, you've mentioned some things like modeling, mentoring, even the arts, and things of that nature. But do you have any other strategies or any other thoughts that you could share? And this is really for the whole panel. Thank you so much. Over.
In my experience of seeing that educators and teachers play an extremely important role in providing that safe space and being good role models. So I think that is really critical as well. And just having someone to be able to reach out to and see as a role model is really important. And yes, I think it is, I feel really lucky that I had a very good upbringing and a positive outlook on life, but a lot of the children we work with don't have that. And I've seen that as educators in both formal and non-formal education, they play a very important role in providing that safe space and helping the children to share best practices with one another.
Yeah, and also I would like to add, also I agree, and I'd like to add that with the globalization, we started to see that many girls are exposed to people from outside the villages, outside their circles, so they are becoming already inspired. And when I said that in our programs, we bring women in STEM role models from our region to bridge that gap. So we don't want, girls will continue to look for people to inspire them. They have this capacity. So whenever we go to activities, they start to mention names from around the globe, and that was really interesting. And this is the advantage of technology and the advantage of globalization, which has good effect. So we're bridging this gap by bringing role models from the Arab world, where they see that on their way to globalization, there are many women in their areas who were able to make it, and they can be inspired by these role models, and we open doors for them to connect to these women. And in the future, actually, my dream to have like some safe platform where young girls, they are connected to these women, where they can talk to these women, girls from villages who have gone through certain challenges, certain challenges, and then they made it. And personally, even in our program, whenever my team comes with a name for a woman and role model, I always say, try to go to women who did not have really that support. Because I do understand that sometimes girls will come to you and say, oh, you had everything to do this. But we do have many role models in our region and across the world who were able to make it with limited support and with limited resources. And what we need to do to highlight these women in order to inspire the young generations through education, through informal education, and that will be, hopefully, will help them be inspired.
Well, thank you for that answer. And it makes me sad to think we've come to the end of our time. Thank you so much, Hadil, Kehkashan, and Phyllis. This has been an inspiring and really a wonderful opportunity for me to be with you as a moderator this morning. And I'm sure all of us on the call have learned something special through this intergenerational discussion. So thanks to each of you. And thanks to all of those in the audience. And